time for another episode of the Animated Critics. Coming to you live from the studio, it's your favorite movie mavericks, T and J.
Welcome to an all-new edition of This Week in Movies. I'm Jay, here with my co-host T, and this week we'll be discussing the 15 films nominated for 3 Oscar spots in the animated category. We'll also be talking about Colin Farrell being the replacement in the Total Recall reboot, and Katherine Heigl leaving her latest film, Adaline. And we'll also be discussing Universal's decision to move Fast 5 up to April, thus creating a longer summer season at the box office. But first, let's take a look at this weekend's box office numbers.
Number 1, we have Megamind with $29 million at the box office, brings its total to $88 million so far. This is its second weekend, and it's holding strong and doing well for DreamWorks again. They seem like they've had a slew of hits lately. Would you agree with that? With Kung Fu Panda and all? And How to Train Your Dragon?
Yeah, this is right in line with what those other films had done. It's kind of surprising that it came up on top this weekend. It was losing on Friday to Unstoppable, but I think the 3D factor kicked in over the weekend and propelled it to the top spot. It is trailing, though, in attendance, How to Train Your Dragon, which was somewhat of an underperformer earlier this year initially, but if it has the legs of that film, which it looks to have, this will break the 200 million mark and should be profitable around the world. We see now that films like Despicable Me and things like that are doing $500 million worldwide, so these 3D kids movies are big business.
And opening last weekend, we had Unstoppable with only $22.5 million, which, in my opinion, is pretty fair for that movie. I don't think that it was going to do anything bigger than that. I know some people were saying $30 million, but I think that was just way too far away for it to reach.
I think those projections were a little outlandish. This did right what it should have done. This is pretty much what we had talked about privately, and this is right in line with things like Taking of Pelham 123, Deja Vu, and other Denzel Washington films. He brings out a core audience. This is his 10th film in a row to gross $20 million or more on its opening weekend, and that's quite a feat in itself. So to see this hit $100 million, it's going to have legs for good word of mouth, but we'll see if it translates to good box office.
And opening as well, we had Skyline with $11.6 million and Morning Glory with $9.2 million in the 4th and 5th slot, respectively. It's a good opening for Skyline, but it's also a bad opening, in my opinion, because there's going to be a bunch of these types of movies that are coming out now. I don't know if this really bodes well for those.
This is a very soft opening for this movie. I think this isn't going to affect those other films. This movie's going to be on cable by the time those films come out. Opening fairly softly as well was Morning Glory, the latest Harrison Ford, Rachel McAdams film. Another box office failure for Harrison Ford.
Yeah. Well, it seems, again, a very late 90s, early 2000s type of movie to be putting out in 2010. Just doesn't make a lot of sense.
With the continued success of Megamind at the box office and a slew of animated 3D children's films coming out this year, there have been some debate over the Oscars and how they're going to handle the animated category. There's only 3 slots to fill, but this year there's a total of 15 films vying for those 3 spots. Do you think that they should open this up and have at least 5 nominations for this many films?
If you look at the list of 15 films, 10 of them immediately can just be thrown to the side. So I don't think it's going to be hard to pick out who's going to be nominated and who's not. Alpha and Omega, obviously not going to make it. Cats and Dogs, obviously not going to make it.
I think you covered the heavy hitters of that genre. Some of the other ones are just mercy please. Like you said, Alpha and Omega doesn't have a shot. Cats and Dogs is a fairly strange nomination, but the Academy has done some strange things, and sometimes it's politics. So who knows what will really get in there? But I gotta believe the front runner in that category is Toy Story 3, anyways.
You're gonna have Shrek Forever After. You're gonna have Toy Story 3, and what else? Maybe How to Train Your Dragon. Maybe Despicable Me.
At this point, we can say that this is the most predictable category in the Oscar race thus far.
There's not a bookie in the world that would take a bet in this category because it's obvious.
In live action film news, Colin Farrell has been announced as the replacement for the lead in the Total Recall reboot, which was the famous Arnold Schwarzenegger classic from the early 90s. You and I both are fans of that early film. Are you a fan of the decision to have Colin Farrell come in and replace Schwarzenegger?
I'm getting a little tired of the replacements that they're picking for these reboots. I mean, Adrian Brody for Predators and now Colin Farrell for this is just, they don't fit the part in my head anyways. Maybe for the younger crowd maybe it doesn't matter, but for me it does make a difference in my mind.
It should make a difference to people in our demographic because of the fact that we grew up on these films and we're going to be most likely out there on opening weekend seeing the reboot. Katherine Heigl has just announced that she will be leaving her latest project, the film Adaline. She apparently wants to spend more time with her new family, and some are saying that that is PR, and some are saying that she's burnt out from the publicity tour that she just went on for Life as We Know It, and isn't eager to jump back into doing a film right away. Now, with her history of ducking out of films, kind of criticizing them after the fact, whatnot, do you think that there was some sort of friction between her and the studio, or do you think that she legitimately just needed some time off?
It's probably more her than the studio. I think that the studio can go through a lot more than any of the actors. They don't really care. They're just looking at the bottom line. And I think she can deliver money. She's obviously a bankable star and has proven that surprisingly a couple times. So I don't know. It's probably she just didn't. She might just want some time off to be with her new kid.
Like you said, she is one of the most bankable young actresses in Hollywood. Her films tend to do at least 40 to 50 million at the box office, 90 million on the high end. And you compare somebody like Kristen Bale or somebody coming up in the ranks whose films don't make a fraction of that, and you realize how valuable she is to a studio. So I have to imagine that they're pretty okay with her taking the time off, and they know they have her locked in with a film that's already in the can coming up. And by the time she gets back on the screens, it won't be no time at all.
And Universal has just announced that Fast 5 is being pushed forward, opening April 29th now. This is a trend that we've been seeing happening recently. In the past few years, summer has been coming sooner and sooner. Do you think that this is going to hurt the box office at all, or do you think that this is actually going to help them?
I think in this case, with this film, the fifth in the Fast and Furious franchise, it's going to help. The last installment opened up late April to a $70 million weekend because it had no direct competition at the box office. I understood what they were doing by scheduling it in June. That was going to coincide with the 10th anniversary of the release of the first film. But by positioning themselves in April, they have the marketplace to themselves. I look for a huge opening weekend for this film. This franchise still pulls them in. But what you were saying in essence about the summer getting longer, I think that it's too early to have a summer that begins in April for a summer event movie going season. The studios seem to want to have every weekend, whether it's in February or in October, have an event picture. And really, I don't know if the summer or winter going movie seasons are even relevant to the average moviegoer anymore.
Yeah, I don't know. It seems that the idea of the tentpole movies is very vastly different than what it used to be 10 years ago, especially 20 years ago. Because now the tent is just the entire year is the tent. The poles are everywhere, and every month we got to have a pole. We're gonna be holding this thing up, and it's getting a little crazy. I mean, just to think that now we've gone from the end of May, really, now we're going into the end of April as the beginning of summer is interesting, and I think that it's going to be a trend that's going to be ongoing.
If you go back 10 years ago, early May was considered way too early, and there was debate about the same topic when films like The Mummy and early X-Men movies were released then. And you look back a couple years ago, and 300 opened up to $70 million in February. So really, it doesn't matter anymore. If you have a quality film, or even if you don't, and the marketing has just pushed that you need to see this movie, audiences will come out no matter when. And I think like you hit it right on the head. There's no tent pole anymore. It's just where every weekend is a major event to somebody.
Right. Well, you're still going to have your holiday-driven movies, like your Thanksgiving type films that come out around Thanksgiving and your Christmas movies, obviously. But other than that, you could release a summer movie in December at this point.
One film that was supposed to be an event film, Skyline, crashed at the box office this weekend, and it was very similar in the trailer to the new film we have, Battle for Los Angeles, coming out. Now, we both had a chance to look at this trailer recently, and how do you think it stacks up from other Aliens versus the World movies you've seen?
it doesn't look like a bad movie. It looks interesting and it looks pretty action-packed, but I think the problem is that these really all are starting to look the same and stylistically very much the same. A lot of the stuff even is getting close to looking like Cloverfield in a lot of the ways that it's shot with the found footage type ideas with monsters. Style-wise, it looks exactly. This could be a commercial for District 9. It looks very much the same. The color palette and all of that. And I think it's interesting that we have Roland Emmerich canceling The Zone because there's too many of these types of movies coming out. With monsters and Apollo 18, even the Paranormal Activity movies. These found tape type things, and also just a lot of alien invasion films.
I think really audiences are getting played out on this whole idea of the apocalyptic event movie. Be sure to check out MovieMavericks.com, where this week we're featuring an exclusive interview with Tony Scott's DP, Ward Russell, where he discussed the changing visual style the director has had over his career. Thank you for joining us, and check back next weekend for an all-new episode of This Week in Movies.